So I'm Sergio Alvarez, a French collector, and this is my second year here in Torino for Artissima. And my good friend Pietro asked me whether I would like to do this tour. So I just couldn't say no. So that's why you got me in front of you today. We have chosen with Pietro a few artists to comment upon. You will discover them just as I discovered them only a couple of days ago, because we have chosen artists we weren't particularly familiar with before. Pietro asked me whether I would say a few words about my collection, and I said no, I wouldn't. It's what to say. It's difficult. It's not a specific theme. It's more French than anything else, of course, because I'm French, and it's a lot simpler, and also because I think that many French artists are not valued what they should. So the bad news is that they're not valued, and the good news is that we collectors can pay them a lot less than if they were, say, American or German. It's more figurative than abstract. Also, I have a number of abstract names also. It's more expressionist than conceptual. It's mostly contemporary. But I also collect African tribal art, with which I have a little problem now, because I started collecting tribal art maybe 10, 15 years ago. And as I didn't know much about this area, I didn't buy anything very expensive. And I ended up with a nice collection, but with no big piece. And now I have a problem, because I don't like anymore what I have, but what I like now is too expensive for me. So this is a good problem to have. And that's it for the introduction, Pietro.
That's good. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Pietro Rigolo, and I work in Los Angeles at the Getty Research Institute. And just a few words about the walk we're going to do and the artists we selected. Sergio and I, we were very intrigued by the theme that had been introduced by the director this year, which is desire and censorship. And we decided to focus actually for this tour only on women artists. Because I think they're particularly interesting in terms of like thinking about censorship, in the sense that many women artists for a very, very long time has been silenced or not recognized as much as they should. And in this particular moment with the Me Too movement and stuff, we are really witnessing a big interest for some of them. And some of them has also a very strong presence in the market. So we will see some women artists that recently have been rediscovered and reappreciated. And also thinking about the theme of desire, of course, the stereotype that is often attached to women artists is that they deal with issues such as sentimentality and intimacy and things like that. So it's actually interesting to see how some of these artists respond or actually decide not to respond to these topics. So if you're still interested and want to follow us, we are going to Cohe Gallery, which is here on the black corridor. Just follow us.
I don't want to say much about Barbara Hammer. She happened to have died only a few months ago. And I say that because the piece that interested me very much here is the video that you have just there, whose name is Snow Job, the Media Hysteria of AIDS. It was made in 1986, which is important to mention, because that was exactly the year where people realized that AIDS was not only a gay problem, but a year when people still didn't understand what was the illness, and there was a lot of fear, a lot of hysteria. The papers were full of incredible comments about, of stigmatization, about bad attitudes toward the people infected by HIV. And Barbara asked her students precisely to go through the press and the and the articles dedicated to this, and to show how what sort of hysteria this was. To my generation, this is an important year, 86, because that's when everything happened to us heterosexuals when we realized this. And it took 10 years before they found, 10 years after, what we call in French therapy, which are the first effective treatment against AIDS. And in the middle of that, you have the death of Keith Haring, for instance. And it's been 10 years for us it's our war years, I would say. And funnily enough, it's not a period which is very present in art, if you think about it. Today, artists talk a lot about the climate collapse, about the refugees crisis, about things happening in the world. But that has been so important to my generation is not that present into art. And that's why I wanted to point out in particular this piece by Barbara.
Yeah, Barbara Hammer has been a pioneer of queer experimental cinema, particularly. I mean, she was a lesbian woman and dealing so much with gender issue and her own sexuality. And in her work, sometimes she also refers to historical women figures which were not recognized as much as male counterparts. And in this case, that work pulls from 1981. It's interesting because she went to Hearst Castle, which was built in Central California by Hearst, the tycoon of newspapers in the States. And the castle was built actually by a woman architect, Julia Morgan. And this video wants to be a sort of an homage to this architect who's been not forgotten or not recognized as much. And she does that also by performing this kind of guerrilla action, in the sense that there are these beautiful pools that visitors are not supposed to dive into. And all of a sudden, she and another person dive into this pool. Barbara Hammer has been talking about active cinema, so a cinema that does not relax you or entertain you, but a cinema that engage with your body in a totally different way. And in a way, we can see here in the movie also herself like engaging in a bodily, physical way to the architecture itself. If you want to follow me to Gallerie in Situ.
A completely different artist, Lynne Cohen. She's a photographer, as you can see, but I was told that she's been trained as a sculptor, and you will understand looking at her work. She shows empty spaces. There are no characters. These places are not created. They are found like that. And there is an atmosphere of strangeness, I would say. Human presence is suggested precisely by its absence. These are not places where we don't see humans. We see them, but they're absent. What is interesting is that the more you look at the photos, the less credible they seem. And I think that it brings here a question about confronting ready-made and installation. She has worked black and white until 1999 and color after, but as in this section they were supposed not to show things that happen after 2000, it's only black and white. But I just wanted to mention that all of her work is not black and white.
I might just want to point your attention to the frames also, which are really interesting and are made by the artists. These are framed in formica, which are done in a way to simulate some stone or marble or like a precious material. So it's interesting to consider the frame, given that she studied sculpture actually, and also they do give to the print kind of a more like gravity, and it's kind of like a object-like quality. And of course, maybe Cohen's work is not that much associated with desire or love in the way that we will see it coming up in other stands, but in a way, if you think of like psychoanalysis and Freud, for Freud, desire is all about actually longing for someone, so for something we don't have and something which is not there. So this idea of the absence of the body also in a way relates to this idea of desire, I think, and at least of interaction. Okay, we go at the end of the corridor and we get to Frittelli.
When we decided to talk about women artists, we were exchanging a few lists of people we could talk about, and Pietro sent me a list where was the name of Tomaso Bingo. He said, "Oh," I said, "Oh, he got it wrong. He's not a woman." It's actually very interesting that these feminists who started to work in the early 70s or even before, maybe, even before, choose to use a male's name. She's fighting against male domination and she uses a male's name. Is that provocation? Is that a performance? Probably both. But it's incredible to think that now everybody knows her with this name. And someone like me who hear the name for the first time normally think that it's a man. So it's a very interesting character, I think. She's very well known for her alphabet. She made a whole alphabet of letters with her own body. So you can see an M, an F, or an E here. It's her body. It's not necessarily her body, in my view, because you'd never see her face. And it's interesting to put that in relation with what we call body language. Body language, what is body language? Is what you say with your body that you don't say with the words. Sometimes you speak and your body says something very different. Here you try to put together the body and the letters and the words. She has been under the limelight of late in Paris with the Dior fashion show, and also there it's interesting to see is it the fashion industry that is using art to make money with? Or is it art that is using the fashion channel to spread over society? I'll let you decide.
Talking about Tomaso Binga, I think an interesting aspect that we see in a lot of these artists we selected is the idea of finding your own voice and finding your language in a way. So, for example, Barbara Hammer, we didn't mention that before, but she would put the camera on her chest or in different part of her body and film in this way. So in a way, trying to go beyond the relationship between the eye and the camera and this idea of the gaze, which for her was associated with a male kind of way of seeing the world. And Tomaso Binga, in a way, it's similar in the sense that she's first and foremost a poet, I think, and so working a lot with language. But then when she kind of transitioned and bridged into visual art, she's still working with language and alphabet, but in a totally different way. So reinterpreting the alphabet through her body, inventing her own kind of graphic scrabbling language, which is unreadable, or in the case of this little print that you see here, which is a close-up of her gomito. So the idea that all the wrinkles and in our body are also a sort of a language and a system of signs. Yeah. And now we just cross to Steineck, that booth there.
With Renate Bertlmann, an Austrian artist, we have got another avant-garde feminist artist, but probably of a different kind. I do appreciate with her is a a sense of humor. I mean, she's playing with pornography, but other terms like irony or utopia are important words to her. I invite you to see this a photo in particular, which is really striking. These are condoms, I believe, but condoms are made of latex, which is a sort of skin. Skin is the largest organ that we have, and it's the organ that interacts with the outside. It's where you can feel cold or heat, where you feel the world through your skin. And I see more skin than latex here, okay? But there is also a lot of humor in what she does. She's been playing with the theme of kitsch, also, I believe, with a number of, ex-votos, reliquaries, etc. That she has turned, as you can imagine, into something a bit porno, for instance. Okay. I like very much the sense of humor of these artists. It's important not to be too serious.
Yeah, that work there is also quite interesting. That's a little bit later, I think, in the early 80s, when in London she discovers sex shops and these sex dolls. And so she brings them home and she builds these quite pathetic portraits of daily life of the two dolls getting drunk together or just passing time with not so much action, actually. But yeah, I think it's interesting actually to talk about kitsch and humor, also if we think about the context in which she was working, because Vienna, of course, in the 60s and in the 70s is a very important city for the development of performance art, and we have all the Wiener Aktionismus, right? So Hermann Nitsch, Otto Müller, all these guys, like all these men doing very, very kind of dramatic, extremely serious work, and her attitude towards performance is completely different and much more playful. And also, I think, like self-ironic in a way, like working, like for example, with roses, with breasts, with blades, all this kind of very consumed symbols in a way. We go to Alberta Pane, which is that way, and then we take the brown corridor. You can follow us.
I accepted to do this walkie-talkie tour because I was told that I could meet Romina de Novelis, and she was supposed to be here, but she's not. So we will do without. I met Romina only a couple of weeks ago in an expo in Paris, curated by Isabelle de Maison Rouge, and I just discovered her 2 weeks ago, and it was a very interesting. It's a very interesting work about confinement of the body and trying to get free, but of course it's impossible. But it's probably not only about the body of a woman. She puts herself with her body naked, so you may think that she's talking about her and about probably something about women. Of course it is about her, about women, but it's a lot more about any suffering body that is on earth. And it's about human condition that we cannot escape, that she's talking about. It's a very interesting and convincing and engaged artist. She has also created a residency for artists in south of Lecce. I don't remember the name. Catania? The name of the Catania. Catania. A residency for artists, and she's very much engaged into trying to create a movement of Mediterranean artists. And we French tend also to like the idea of being a Mediterranean country, which we are a little bit less than Italy, but also.
I should also point out that I think she's doing a PhD in anthropology in Paris, and she's studying Tarantismo. which is this phenomenon in Puglia, like this kind of ritual dance in which women kind of get into this kind of ecstatic mode in a way. So she's really interested in the position of like historically and culturally, the position of woman in southern Italy and in society. And for this performance, this is a video realized during a performance that lasted several hours, in which she walked from Galatina in Puglia to the seashore, which is the southern tip of Puglia. And during this sort of march, she gathers women that she knows and she collaborates with. So assembling this sort of army of women walking towards the sea that kind of becomes the limit of, in a way, the limit of our culture and the limit of our society. So I think it's nice to end with her work and with this booth, because we've seen many historical feminist positions through the 60s and the 70s, and here we have a much younger artist working now on similar issues, but in with a different approach, and also with a different understanding, I think, of the history of performance itself, in the sense that also her appearance, if you want, you can see similarities with some performance artists such as Marina Abramovic and others. So she's, of course, inscribing her work into the history of performance as it was built by some of the other artists we saw during the walk. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And if you have questions or you want to hang out a little bit more, we are here, and don't be shy. Thank you.